The Galactic Senate was in turmoil. For centuries, the vast interstellar civilization known as the Orion Dominion had maintained a fragile balance of power among its many species. Yet now, the Draencar, a warlike race with advanced weaponry and an insatiable hunger for conquest, had broken the peace. Their fleets were moving across the galaxy, system by system, crushing all in their path. Desperate, the Dominion sought a solution, but the alien leaders could not agree on one. The Senate chambers, a colossal ringed station orbiting the capital planet Voltrion, were filled with argument and fear. Many saw only one path forward: surrender. The Draencar were too strong, too ruthless. And then, a lone figure stepped forward. Admiral Elias Richter, a human from the distant Sol system, was an anomaly in the Dominion's ranks. Humanity, a relative newcomer to interstellar politics, was often dismissed as insignificant, a minor species with neither the numbers or the technology to influence galactic affairs. But Richter had earned respect through sheer brilliance. He had commanded the Dominion's forces in skirmishes that should have been lost, using strategies no alien species had ever considered. Now, standing before the most powerful leaders of the galaxy, he did something that no other had dared. "Surrender is not an option," he declared. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of conviction. "We can win. But only if you listen to me." Laughter rippled through the chamber. The idea was absurd. How could a single human, from a species so insignificant, claim to have a plan that would defeat an empire that had crushed civilizations older than Earth itself? Senator Veltor of the Zelnari, a reptilian species known for their pragmatism, sneered. "Your arrogance is amusing, human. Even the greatest minds of our age have found no path to victory." Richter's gaze was unwavering. "That's because you're all playing by the same rules. The Draencar are stronger than us in direct combat, but they have weaknesses. And humans," he paused, letting his words settle over the room, "are experts at exploiting weaknesses." Silence fell. For the first time, the idea took root: perhaps this human did have something worth hearing. But there was another problem. The Dominion's fleet was scattered and outdated compared to the Draencar war machine. Even if they had a strategy, they didn't have the resources to fight. Richter, however, had already considered this. "I need complete authority over military operations. I need access to your fleets, your hidden assets, and your most dangerous technologies." The Senate erupted in protest. No single person had ever been granted such control. It was unthinkable. But then, from the shadows of the chamber, an ancient voice spoke. "The human is right." All turned to face Grand Arbiter Clithos, an elder of the Athari, the longest-living species in the Dominion. Known for their wisdom and neutrality, the Athari rarely took sides. If Clithos was speaking, it meant something. "If we do nothing, the Dominion will fall," Clithos continued. "We have seen what happens to those who underestimate humans. Their history is written in impossible victories. If anyone can do what we cannot, it is Admiral Richter." Reluctantly, the vote was cast. And against all odds, the decision was made: Elias Richter, a lone human, was now in control of the Dominion's last hope. As he left the chamber, Richter knew what lay ahead. He would not just be fighting the Draencar, he would be fighting the doubt of every species watching him, waiting for him to fail. But failure was not an option. Because if he failed, humanity, and the entire galaxy, was doomed. The moment Admiral Elias Richter stepped out of the Galactic Senate chamber, he knew the real battle had already begun. It wasn't just the Draencar he had to defeat, it was the doubt, the resistance, and the centuries-old traditions that bound the Dominion's military to predictable, outdated strategies. His first stop was the Dominion's High Command Center on Voltrion, where the fleet admirals and war councils of various species awaited him. Some were hostile, some were skeptical, and a few were outright disgusted that a human had been given such power. Fleet Admiral Exor Vanak of the Ulari, a towering insectoid with razor-sharp mandibles, clicked his claws in irritation. "The Draencar have burned our outposts to ash. What can you do that we haven't already tried, human?" Richter placed a holographic display on the command table. A complex network of glowing lines appeared, hyperspace routes, supply chains, and fleet movements of both the Dominion and the Draencar. "I can do what they don't expect," he said. The display zoomed in on a seemingly unimportant system, Osiris 9, a dead, lifeless world at the edge of Dominion space. A place no one had any reason to defend. Admiral Selvara, a feline like Rethari, frowned. "Osiris 9? There's nothing there." "That's what they think," Richter replied. "And that's why we're going to make it our first battlefield." The council erupted in disbelief. Osiris 9 was tactically useless. It had no resources, no colonies, no strategic value. Why defend a worthless rock? Richter smirked. "Because the Draencar think like conquerors. They expect us to fight like warriors. But we're not going to fight them in a battle they understand." He tapped the display. A new image flickered to life. Deep within the planet's crust, hidden for centuries, was an ancient Dominion weapons vault. A relic of a forgotten war. The Ulari admiral hissed. "You intend to use that asterisk?" Richter's expression darkened. "I intend to do whatever it takes to win." The room fell silent. Some looked horrified, others intrigued. The weapon was considered too dangerous, too unstable. The last time it had been activated, an entire moon had vanished from the star charts. But Richter wasn't finished. The Draencar have superior fleets, but they rely on brute force. They don't expect traps. They don't expect misdirection. And they definitely don't expect humans. The skepticism in the room slowly turned to curiosity. "What's the plan?" Selvara asked. Richter leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with something the Dominion had long forgotten, audacity. "We're going to lure them in. We're going to make them think they've won. And when the time is right..." He activated the final part of the hologram. The entire Draencar fleet at Osiris 9 blinked out of existence in a single, blinding wave of destruction. "We're going to remind them why underestimating humanity is the biggest mistake they'll ever make." The Dominion's fleet moved in secret. Osiris 9 was a barren world, its surface cracked and scarred by ancient wars, forgotten by most of the galaxy. But beneath its crust lay something far more valuable than any resource, an abandoned experimental superweapon. Admiral Elias Richter stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, humanity's most advanced warship, overlooking the bleak, cratered landscape of Osiris 9. He had convinced the Dominion's reluctant admirals to follow his plan, but trust was still fragile. If this failed, it would not only cost them the battle, it would cost him whatever credibility he had left. "Status report," Richter said. His second-in-command, Commander Sarah Voss, a fellow human and one of the few people who truly believed in him, responded immediately. "The Dominion fleet is in position, Admiral. All ships are running minimal energy signatures to stay off the Draencar's long-range scans. The weapon beneath the surface is unstable, but we've rigged it for remote detonation." Richter nodded. "And the bait?" Voss smirked. "En route." A small, outdated Dominion patrol fleet had been sent toward Draencar-controlled space, broadcasting distress signals as if it were a scattered remnant of the retreating Dominion Navy. It was an obvious target, weak, isolated, and ripe for annihilation. The Draencar took the bait. Within hours, their fleet emerged from hyperspace in a thunderous flash. Hundreds of warships, sleek and bristling with weaponry, descended upon Osiris 9, eager to crush what they believed to be the last remnants of Dominion resistance. Richter watched as the Draencar ships swarmed, surrounding the outnumbered Dominion defenders. The Dominion captains played their roles perfectly, firing back weakly, transmitting desperate distress calls, pretending to be a broken force on its last legs. Admiral Exorvanak, the Ulari fleet commander, watched from his own ship, mandibles clicking in approval. "They've taken the bait. Now what?" "Now," Richter said, "we make them commit." He activated the second phase of his plan. Across the battlefield, small Dominion ships, seemingly unimportant, barely noticeable, began transmitting scrambled data bursts. To the Draencar, it looked like chaotic panic, like the Dominion forces were desperately calling for backup. The Draencar warlords, ever hungry for total annihilation, took the bait again. A second Draencar fleet arrived, larger than the first. Their commanders weren't just looking for victory anymore, they wanted to erase their enemy from existence. They moved in aggressively, pushing deep into the battlefield. Richter's eyes never left the tactical map. Almost there, just a little more. Finally, the Draencar committed their entire force. "Commander Voss," Richter said, his voice as steady as ever. "Trigger the collapse." Deep beneath the surface of Osiris, 9, ancient mechanisms whirred to life. The ground trembled. The air itself seemed to distort. And then, in a single, terrifying instant, the planet's hidden weapon activated. A pulse of energy, invisible but devastating, rippled outward at faster-than-light speed. Every Draencar ship caught in the blast, hundreds of warships, some the size of cities, suffered immediate and catastrophic failure. Shields flickered and died. Engines overloaded. Weapons detonated inside their own hulls. The battlefield turned into chaos. Draencar warships, once invincible, now drifted helplessly as Dominion ships, previously outmatched, swooped in like vultures. Precision strikes ripped apart their disoriented enemies. What had once been a sure victory for the Draencar turned into a massacre. On the bridge of the Vanguard, Richter watched the carnage unfold. Exorvanak, seeing the destruction, let out a chittering laugh. "You turned their own strength against them. You tricked them into believing they had already won." Richter folded his arms. "That's how you defeat an empire that only knows how to conquer. You let them think they've won, and then you take it from them." As the last Draencar warship exploded in a ball of fire, the Dominion admirals watching from their command centers knew one thing for certain: Elias Richter was not just another officer. He was humanity's greatest weapon. And this was only the beginning. The wreckage of the Draencar fleet still burned in Osiris 9's orbit, a silent monument to Admiral Elias Richter's first victory. The Dominion's forces had suffered minimal casualties, and for the first time in years, the enemy had been utterly humiliated. But Richter knew that this was just the opening move. The Draencar were relentless. They wouldn't retreat in fear, they would retaliate with fury. The real challenge had yet to come. Inside the Vanguard's war room, the Dominion's high-ranking admirals and commanders gathered for a debrief. The room was tense. Some still couldn't believe what had just happened. Others, particularly the alien officers who had doubted Richter, now looked at him with something close to awe. Admiral Selvara, her feline-like tail twitching, broke the silence. "The Draencar don't lose. They will come back with everything they have." Richter leaned over the holographic table, watching the shifting star maps. "I'm counting on it." The room fell silent. Fleet Admiral Exorvanak's mandibles clicked. "You want them to attack us again?" "They already will," Richter said. "The question is whether they do it on our terms or theirs." He tapped a command into the table, and the map shifted to highlight several key Draencar-controlled star systems. "Right now, they think we're just another species trying to fight back. That was our advantage in this battle, they underestimated us. But that won't happen again. Next time, they'll treat us as a serious threat." Selvara narrowed her eyes. "Which means they'll send their full war machine." "Exactly," Richter said. "Which is why we have to hit them first." Exorvanak let out a hissing laugh. "A counterattack? You surprise me, human. Most of the Dominion's admirals would flee after a battle like this." Richter smirked. "That's why they've been losing." He turned back to the map. "The Draencar's strength is their numbers. Their empire is vast, their fleet's endless. We can't match them in a war of attrition." He zoomed in on 3 key systems. "But what they do have are key supply routes. Infrastructure. Leadership. Commander Sarah Voss folded her arms. You're talking about decapitation strikes. Richter nodded. If we take out their key command nodes, we don't just hurt them, we cripple them. Their warlords are used to fighting with overwhelming force, not strategic losses. We don't need to destroy their fleets. We need to cut their head off and watch the body collapse. Exorvanak studied the map. What are you proposing? Richter's expression hardened. We make a statement. He pointed to a single planet, Drakthal, a heavily fortified world deep in Drankar space. It wasn't the homeworld, but it was close. A military stronghold. A symbol of their power. Selvara's eyes widened. That's suicide. No one has ever attacked that world and survived. That's why it will work, Richter countered. They won't expect it. Exorvanak clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. And if they do? Richter's smirk was cold. Then we make sure it's the last mistake they ever make. Hours later, the Drankar Warlords Council. Far across the galaxy, in the black heart of the Drankar Empire, the warlords convened in a massive chamber of steel and fire. Their leader, High Warlord Zather, loomed over the gathered generals, his battle-scarred exoskeleton glowing under the blood-red lights. The humans, he growled, must be eradicated. The warlords snarled in agreement. The defeat at Osiris 9 had been an embarrassment. They had crushed thousands of species before, yet a single human had turned their strength into weakness. This, Admiral Richter, must be made an example, Zather continued. We will deploy the full force of the Crimson Armada. Every ship, every warrior, will burn his name from history. The warlords roared in approval. Plans were made, fleets were mobilized. But before they could strike, an alarm blared through the chamber. The massive display screens flickered, and to the shock of the Drankar leadership, an unauthorized transmission appeared. A human stood before them, his sharp blue eyes staring straight through the screen. Admiral Elias Richter. The chamber fell into stunned silence. No enemy had ever dared to send a message directly to the Warlords Council. It was unthinkable. Richter's voice was calm. Controlled. Dangerous. You don't know what kind of war you've started. The warlord seethed, but Richter continued. You think the Dominion is weak. You think we'll kneel. His smirk returned, but this time, it wasn't just confidence, it was a promise. You don't know humans very well, do you? Before the warlords could react, the screens cut to a live feed. It showed Drakthal. Burning. Explosions rocked the military world as Dominion forces, *human-led *Dominion forces, rained fire from the sky. Drankar warships exploded in their own spaceports. Supply depots detonated in massive fireballs. It was a slaughter. And Richter was showing it to them in real time. You wanted war, Richter said coldly. You just got it. Then the transmission cut out. For the first time in their brutal history, the Drankar warlords felt something they had never known before. Fear. The Drankar warlords had ruled through terror for centuries. They had crushed civilizations, enslaved entire species, and rewritten history with fire and blood. But never, had they been humiliated like this. Drakthal, one of their strongest military bastions, had been turned to rubble. Supply lines were shattered. Entire fleets left stranded. And worst of all, it had been done by a human. The warlord seethed. High Warlord Zather, his massive, armor-plated frame hunched over the war table, slammed a clawed fist into the metal surface. The impact sent cracked spiderwebbing across the reinforced steel. This ends now. His voice was a low, guttural snarl. We will hunt down this Richter and make him suffer. We will burn every world that harbors him. The warlords growled in approval. But one of them, Warlord Kraxtan, hesitated. High Warlord, this human, he fights differently. He is not like the others. Zather's glowing red eyes locked onto him. Are you suggesting we fear him? Kraxtan lowered his head slightly, but his mandibles clicked in defiance. I am suggesting we do not make the same mistake twice. Zather considered this. Then he turned to the holomap of the galaxy, where Dominion-controlled space flickered in blue and Draencar-controlled space pulsed red. Deploy the Crimson Armada, he ordered. Every ship, every soldier. We will not wait for them to strike again. We will bring the full weight of our empire down upon them. He bared his fangs. And we will erase the name Elias Richter from existence. Aboard the Vanguard. Admiral Elias Richter leaned back in his chair, watching the incoming reports. His strike on Drakthal had been a masterpiece of precision. The Dominion's forces had suffered minimal losses, while the Draencar had been left in chaos. Supply chains disrupted, morale shattered, strategic plans ruined. But he knew this wouldn't be the end of it. Sarah Voss stepped forward. We've intercepted enemy transmissions. The Draencar aren't retreating. They're mobilizing. Richter smirked. Good. Selvara flicked her feline tail in irritation. Good asterisk? They're bringing their entire fleet. They'll throw everything they have at us. That's exactly what we need, Richter said. The Dominion officers looked at him as if he were insane. Exorvanak clacked his mandibles. Explain. Richter stood and tapped the holotable. The map zoomed out, showing the galactic layout. The Draencar are predictable, he said. They only know how to fight with overwhelming force. They believe that enough ships, enough firepower, will always guarantee victory. He zoomed in on a specific sector. But their empire is big, too big. It relies on hyperspace relays, fuel depots, and communication hubs to keep it all running. And right now, with their forces spread thin from years of expansion, they cannot afford to concentrate everything in one place. Exorvanak's eyes gleamed with understanding. You're saying if they send their full fleet, they'll leave the rest of their empire exposed, Richter finished. Selvara's ears flattened. You're gambling that they'll be reckless enough to make that mistake. Richter smirked. I'm counting on it. He turned back to the map. We're not just going to fight their fleet. We're going to trap it. He tapped a single star system, **Ephra, 7 **. A system filled with volatile nebulae, hidden asteroid fields, and gravitational anomalies that made conventional fleet movement difficult. If we force them to engage us here, we can use the terrain against them. Divide their forces, disrupt their formations. Voss raised an eyebrow. And if they don't fall for it? Richter's smirk widened. They will. Draencar War Fleet, hyperspace transit. The Crimson Armada was a terrifying sight. Thousands of warships, their hulls blackened from centuries of battle, moved in formation through the swirling blue of hyperspace. It was the largest fleet the Draencar had ever assembled. In the heart of the Armada, aboard the Doombringer, High Warlord Zather stood before his bridge crew, his claws digging into the armrest of his throne. He had studied this human, this Richter. And he had come to a simple conclusion: he was dangerous. Not because of his strength, but because of his mind. And that meant he had to be eliminated with absolute force. Zather's second-in-command, war leader Threxus, turned toward him. We have intercepted Dominion fleet movements. They are gathering at Ephra, 7. Zather's fangs gleamed. They think they can make a stand? Threxus nodded. It appears so. But High Warlord, something feels off. This human has outmaneuvered us before. Zather growled. He is no god. He is flesh. And he will burn. His claws tightened around the armrest. Set course for Ephra, 7. End this war. Aboard the Vanguard. Richter watched as the Dominion fleet assembled. Dozens of ships, from massive dreadnoughts to smaller strike craft, hovered in the stormy depths of the Ephra, 7 nebula. The ionized gases crackled with energy, creating the perfect cover for his plan. Sarah Voss approached. Draencar fleet will arrive within 6 hours. Richter nodded. Good. Selvara frowned. We're outnumbered 5-1. If this goes wrong. Richter turned to her. It won't. Exorvanak let out a clicking laugh. I hope, for all our sakes, that human arrogance is justified. Richter didn't reply. Instead, he turned back to the massive swirling storm outside the viewport. The Draencar thought they were coming to crush the Dominion's last hope. But in reality, they were walking into a slaughterhouse. Richter had spent years studying warfare. Earth's history was filled with battles ere the outnumbered and outgunned had triumphed against impossible odds. Thermopylae, Agincourt, Midway. And now, Ephra, 7 was about to join that list. His fingers tightened around the edge of the war table. Time to show the galaxy what humanity is truly capable of. The storm-choked skies of Ephra, 7 crackled with energy as the Dominion fleet lay hidden within the nebula's turbulent depths. Electric discharges illuminated the asteroid fields like silent flashes of distant gunfire. It was a graveyard of ancient warships, wrecks from battles fought centuries ago, ghosts of those who had once dared to challenge the Draencar. Admiral Elias Richter stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, watching as his trap was about to be sprung. They're coming. Commander Sarah Voss nodded grimly, her eyes fixed on the swirling data feeds. Hyperspace rupture detected. Multiple rupture points. The entire Draencar fleet is arriving. Richter didn't move. He had expected this. On the holomap, red markers flared into existence, hundreds upon hundreds of Draencar warships, spilling into real space like a swarm of locusts. Their formations were tight, disciplined, the sheer mass of their forces enough to blot out entire sections of the map. Selvara cursed under her breath. There's so many of them. Exorvanak clicked his mandibles in what could have been amusement or deep concern. Your trap had better work, human. Richter's gaze remained steady. It will. The Dominion fleet, dwarfed by the enemy force, remained silent. No transmissions, no movements. Just the eerie stillness of a predator waiting in the long grass. But the Draencar weren't looking for hidden dangers. They had come for slaughter. Aboard the Doombringer. High Warlord Zathar stood at the heart of the Draencar flagship, his claws gripping the armrests of his command throne. His fleet was positioned. The Dominion fleet was cornered. The battle was already won. Send the first wave forward, he ordered. The forward assault ships, massive spear-headed destroyers bristling with weapons, surged ahead. They entered the nebula, their shields crackling against the ionized storm, weapons primed. Silence. There was no response from the Dominion fleet. Zathar's mandibles twitched. Something is wrong. Then the first explosion bloomed within the nebula. A Draencar destroyer vanished in a sphere of pure white fire. Seconds later, another one was ripped apart. Then another. Panic rippled through the Draencar vanguard as more ships detonated in rapid succession. Some were struck by unseen projectiles, others simply vanished into gravitational anomalies. Report. Zathar barked. A panicked officer screeched, "It's a minefield. The nebula is rigged with hidden explosives and gravitic traps." Zathar's rage boiled. That rat. He knew we would charge in. Before he could issue a recall order, the real attack began. Aboard the Vanguard. Richter's voice was ice. Now. From the depths of the nebula, Dominion warships emerged like phantoms. Camouflaged by the storm, they had waited in perfect silence, hidden until the moment was right. And now, they struck. From hidden firing positions, artillery dreadnoughts unleashed hell. Devastator torpedoes pierced shields, detonating with the force of collapsing stars. Sniper ships fired precision railgun rounds, targeting command bridges and weak points. Draencar vessels reeled in confusion. Their tight formations, once a symbol of strength, had turned into a death trap. Ships collided, explosions rippled through their fleet. Richter watched as his plan unfolded flawlessly. Phase 2, he ordered. Exorvanak's fleet, now fully committed, circled around from the far side of the nebula, cutting off the Drankar's retreat. Selva's strike force surged forward, engaging the disoriented enemy head-on. The trap had snapped shut. Aboard the Doombringer. Zathar's eyes blazed with fury. His massive fleet was being dismantled. He had never suffered a loss this devastating. This is impossible. More ships were dying by the second. Weapons disabled. Engines overloaded. Entire legions annihilated. ***. The humans fought differently. Where the Dominion once fought defensively, they now attacked with surgical precision. Where the Drankar expected chaos, they found ruthless efficiency. This was not just resistance. This was a reckoning. Aboard the Vanguard. Voss turned to Richter, eyes wide. We've isolated the Doombringer. Richter's expression turned cold. Send them a message. Voss nodded. A direct transmission was sent to Zathar's flagship. The Drankar leader appeared on the holoscreen, his face twisted in rage. You, he hissed. Me, Richter said simply. His voice was calm, steady, deadly. Your fleet is finished. Surrender. Zathar laughed, a harsh, guttural sound. You think I will kneel to you? Richter's smirk returned. No, his finger hovered over the firing command. But you'll still lose. The Vanguard's superweapon, a prototype mass-driver cannon, ***, fired directly into the Doombringer. The round ripped through the flagship's hull, tearing it apart from the inside. Fire burst through the ship as secondary explosions ripped through its core. On the screen, Zathar's face twisted in disbelief before the transmission cut to static. The High Warlord of the Drankar was dead. Aftermath. The remaining Drankar ships, leaderless and broken, fled. The once invincible fleet had been annihilated. Cheers erupted across the Dominion fleet. Against all odds, they had won. Selvar turned to Richter, eyes filled with something he had never seen before, ***, absolute ***. You just changed the fate of the galaxy. Exorvanak let out a chittering laugh. And you did it with a human strategy. Deception. Precision. Ruthlessness. He clapped Richter on the shoulder. I finally understand your kind. Richter exhaled, staring out at the battlefield. Fires burned. Wreckage drifted. The Drankar were broken. But he wasn't done. He turned to Voss. Prepare the fleet. She blinked. For what? Richter's voice was calm. For the final strike. The wreckage of the Drankar fleet drifted in the stormy void of Ephra 7. Fires burned, hulls cracked, and escape pods floated like scattered seeds in the abyss. The once mighty Crimson Armada, the terror of the galaxy, had been annihilated. But Admiral Elias Richter wasn't celebrating. He stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, staring at the holomap. The Drankar had lost their fleet, their High Warlord, and their ability to wage war at scale. Yet they still existed. And that was unacceptable. Richter turned to his officers. We're not done. Selvar flicked her tail, eyes narrowing. You mean to invade the Drankar homeworld? Exorvanak clicked his mandibles in amusement. The war is already won, human. Richter shook his head. Not yet. He pointed at the map, at the heart of the Drankar Empire. Karzon, the homeworld of the Drankar, their seat of power, the unbreakable fortress they had built over millennia. Their fleets are gone, but their war machine is still running. If we leave them alone, they'll rebuild. Maybe not in a year, maybe not in 10, but eventually, they'll come back. He turned to the room, eyes burning with conviction. We end this. Now. A heavy silence fell over the command center. Then Voss stepped forward, jaw clenched. I'll prepare the fleet. Selvar exhaled, then smirked. Damn humans. Always so dramatic. Exorvanak's mandibles twitched in a grin. I look forward to watching what comes next. And just like that, the Dominion fleet turned toward Karzon. The final battle was coming. Karzon, the last stronghold. The Draencar homeworld had never been invaded. For 10,000 years, it had stood untouchable, guarded by planetary defense stations, orbital battle platforms, and the Titan-class dreadnoughts that had never left their system. The remnants of the Draencar leadership gathered in the war hall, their monstrous forms hunched over a flickering hollow table. Warlords, generals, and the surviving nobility all watched in horror as Dominion forces pushed toward their world. The impossible was happening. A human was about to invade Karzon. The warlords hissed and growled among themselves, their fear turning to rage. We still have ground forces, one bellowed. We have planetary shields. Surface cannons. We can hold them off, another declared. But Warlord Kraxtan, the last surviving senior commander, knew better. His mandibles twitched as he stared at the reports. No, we can't. The others turned to him, furious. You would surrender? One spat. Kraxtan's claws scraped the table. We underestimated this human before. We assumed he would act like the others. That he would be merciful. He turned his burning gaze toward the hologram of the incoming fleet. He will not make that mistake. Orbital invasion. The Dominion fleet arrived like a thunderstorm, emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation. Draencar defense stations opened fire immediately, unleashing storms of plasma, railgun rounds, and missile barrages. The planetary shield flared to life, creating a shimmering blue dome around the world. But Richter had anticipated this. Launch the Mjolnir. From the Dominion flagship, a colossal warhead was deployed. The Mjolnir-class kinetic weapon was not a nuclear bomb. It was worse. A 2-kilometer-long slab of tungsten, guided by AI, accelerating to hypersonic velocity. It slammed into the planetary shield with the force of an extinction event. The shield flared, held for 3 seconds, then shattered like glass. Richter didn't hesitate. All ships, fire at will. From orbit, Dominion ships unleashed hell. Orbital railguns tore through city-sized fortresses. Missile swarms rained down on military installations. Plasma lances burned through Draencar strongholds. The planet itself trembled. Then, the drop pods launched. The fall of Karzon. Draencar warriors, bred for battle, made their last stand in the streets of their capital. The city burned around them as Dominion shock troops descended from the skies. Mech stormed through the streets, cutting down enemy formations. Air support obliterated armored divisions. Tactical AI-controlled drones outmaneuvered the desperate defenders. And at the heart of the battle, Richter himself led the charge. Wearing advanced power armor, he fought alongside his troops, cutting down Draencar warriors with brutal precision. His rifle never missed, his commands never faltered. The Draencar, once conquerors of the galaxy, were reduced to scattered holdouts. By the time the sun rose over the ruined capital, the war was over. The Draencar, the once invincible empire, had fallen. Aftermath, a new era. The Dominion fleet hovered over the shattered world. Fires still raged. Smoke choked the skies. On the surface, the surviving Draencar warlords were dragged before Richter. Kraxtan, now the highest-ranking Draencar alive, knelt before the human admiral. His body was wounded, his armor cracked. But his eyes still held defiance. What will you do now, human? He spat. Enslave us? Erase us? Become what we once were? Richter stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned to the Dominion soldiers around him. The war is over, his voice carried through the ruined city. The Draencar Empire is no more, He looked back at Kraxtan. You asked what I'll do? He leaned in. I'm going to make sure the galaxy never forgets what happened here. Then he stood. Get them out of my sight. As the last warlords were taken away, Richter turned to his officers. Selvara stepped beside him. "It's done." Exorvanak nodded. Humanity was underestimated. Now, they will never be again. Richter exhaled, looking up at the burning sky. He had come into this war as a soldier. A strategist. A man fighting for survival. But now? Now, he had changed the fate of the entire galaxy. And the galaxy would never be the same. Epilogue: A legend is born. In the years that followed, Elias Richter's name became legend. The man who brought down an empire. The human who reshaped the stars. Some feared him. Some revered him. But none could deny his impact. Humanity, once dismissed as insignificant, was now seen as something far greater. The galaxy had learned a lesson. One they would never forget. Never underestimate humanity. Never underestimate a single human.